Welcome to Samu't Sari, Conversations with Mimi, a weekly podcast by Social, also a member of the Guerrilla Podcast Syndicate. Samu't Sari is where we can show that ordinary people do extraordinary things. Tune in to be entertained and to learn something new with your host, Mimi Laurilla.
Hello and welcome to Samu't Sari Conversations with Mimi, a podcast featuring hot topics and other topics obviously of interest to men and women alike. We feature guests who share their passion and their commitment to their profession, their talents, or whatever it is that they would like to build up in terms of what their life calling is all about. So here at Samu't Sari, we share stories to inspire you, stories from ordinary people who make extraordinary things. And today's episode or interview, I have a special guest all the way from New Zealand, from Wellington, New Zealand. So we are miles and miles apart. And his name is Noel Bautista. Hello, Noel, and welcome to Samu't Sari.
Hi, Mimi. Thank you for having me, and thanks to all your listeners for listening in. And kumusta kayong lahat?
That's right. So, Noel, the nice thing about our podcast is the primary audience are Filipinos all over the world. So it could be good day, good afternoon, good night, wherever they are. And I'm very proud to be a part of the Guerrilla Podcast Network because they're the ones responsible for spreading the word about all the positive messages and all the important podcasts as part of the network. So
that's great.
So maybe people are wondering, why did I invite you? So I think the first thing that we have to do is get to know you a little bit more. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, Noel? Maybe start by just a brief description of who Noel is before New Zealand and who Noel now is in New Zealand. Because you've been in New Zealand for more than 7, 8, 9, 10 years, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, so just give us an idea of who you are and what makes you my special guest for today.
Thank you, Mimi. First, I'd like to thank you, and modestly, I'd like to thank you on behalf of all the Filipinos here in New Zealand, because I like to think that I represent all of them, if not most of them. But talking about what you just asked me to narrate or describe, I've been here around 10, 11 years, and I started out as an OFW in New Zealand, and you see, there's a very specific cross-section or demographic of Filipinos here in New Zealand, much like the Filipinos in Australia, as opposed to other races or other migrants here. We're all skilled, and I guess you know that very well. I'm just saying this for our audience now. Ang karamihan naman ng mga Pilipino rito, kung hindi allied medical workers, as in nurses, physical therapists, phlebotomists, even doctors. Yeah. We are in the building industry. Yeah. If we're not in the building industry, as you might guess, we're in IT. Yes, for Jarvis. I'm sure Jarvis, your husband, is very well acquainted with this. We fill very specific gaps in the labor market of New Zealand. Ngayon, ako naman, I noticed that there are two phases of the Filipino community here in New Zealand. Mm-hmm. One phase is that of the permanent resident, permanent resident / citizen. Ito yung mga nakapag-establish na rito sa New Zealand. Yeah. They've stayed here. They've found a way to establish a foothold here. Kumbaga, na alam na nila yung gagawin nila, natanggap na sila rito sa New Zealand, ginawa na silang kapamilya ng New Zealand. Now, the other half is the more transient side of the Filipino community. Alam nyo to, ito yung mga labas-pasok ng mga migrant na can't call them migrants, but they are migrant laborers. Mm-hmm. Now, the term used here is guest workers.
Guest workers. Oh, okay. That's the first time I've heard about that.
And that's what they're called here because they're guests, but they're also workers. See? Right. Okay. Pero sa atin, alam naman natin kung anong tawag doon, di ba? Yun ang ating very popular OFWs.
Of course. So they don't have any intentions of staying there. They just want to work
Well,
there.
yeah, that is probably in the distant future, if they are invited or if they find a so-called visa pathway, towards staying here. So, yun na nga yung two phases of the Filipino community here in New Zealand. Those two worlds, sometimes they overlap, sometimes in church, in civic groups, community, especially in sports, as you know very well. They overlap, they interact, but not all the time. So, ako naman, ang ginagawa ko, I have a blog, I write a blog, and this is like the bridge between those two communities.
Okay. Okay, Noel, I've picked up a lot of things that you've said, which I'd like to tease out a little bit. Okay, so let's start first with, obviously our topic is about what are the current things that are happening in New Zealand now. And I want to put that back into perspective in terms of you moving to New Zealand, because a lot of people are probably still not as aware of New Zealand as a place where you can really build a new life, because majority of the people are still looking for bigger countries like the UK, the US, and obviously Australia is a part of the wish list of places where they want to go and potentially go there as a permanent resident or as a citizen eventually. In your personal experience, what made you decide that New Zealand is probably a very good transition point to build a new life from way back 10 years ago? Because I will anchor that into another question which has something to do with the current Filipinos now. But in your case, what was your main motivation for uprooting your family and moving overseas?
I have a personal backstory kasi my brother had been here, established a foothold, nakarating na siya in the 90s.
Okay, so you have links or connections or ties to the country.
Yes, yeah. I had a family linkage. Ngayon, dumalaw kami sa kanya dito. That was middle 2000s. Notice. Tapos sabi niya, ano bang ginagawa mo sa Pilipinas? Sabi niya, if it's not the most lucrative situation that there is, why don't you try out here? So one thing led to another, na nakapag-temporary visa ako, and the rest is history.
Yes.
Stay now.
So lucky you have the ties.
My case, correct. My case is a bit, it's not typical. Kaya lang, what is typical is if you can find a job that, as you know, the locals or New Zealanders aren't particularly interested in, and you get, you grasp that, and you don't let go, and you upskill, eventually you'll find a way to stay here.
Yes, I agree. Because Noel, believe it or not, until now I get those random messages on Facebook. I get a random email every so often asking me, "Ma'am, I want to know how to go to New Zealand. What do I need to do to move to New Zealand?" Correct. So people think it's as easy as, just quitting your job in the Philippines, boom, off you go.
Correct.
So,
it's not. As you know, it's not.
I know. So I want you to explain to our listeners today, what are the newer requirements? Because I'm pretty sure from 5 years ago, 6 years ago, things have changed drastically.
It's very fluid.
Yes. So what is your knowledge at the moment in terms of the jobs that are available or lucrative, and are there changes to the migration policy that you are aware of? Okay. So guys, we're not talking about this because Noel and I know a lot about New Zealand immigration, but because we have personal experience of going through that, we're just sharing with you. So that's a disclaimer, because people might think we are, certified immigration.
Or consultant. Hindi po. Lahat to medyo anecdotal. Yung tungkol lang sa rinig namin, yung mga experience namin.
Of course.
Pero, what the Filipinos enjoy, I'll stick to what I know, obviously. What Filipinos enjoy here in New Zealand is we have the benefit of standing on the shoulders of those who came before us, nakabayan natin. A specific industry is the dairy industry. I don't have numbers with me now, Mimi, pero Kiwis don't like to work in the dairy industry anymore. They would rather work in retail. They would rather work in the traditional trades, as you very well know. For the benefit of our tagapakinig, no, ang mga trades, yung mga carpentero, mekaniko, plumber, mason, yun ang mga specific trades na you pass an apprenticeship, tapos magiging master of whatever ka na, and then eventually you become a master of whatever trade. In the Philippines, vocational, nothing to be ashamed of. Anyway, going back to what I said, because Filipinos are hardworking, they speak English better than the average migrant worker, no mentioning of any races, no, and because we're team players, we are accepted as migrant workers almost as a rule. Now, to make it easier for us, no, like for example in the dairy industry, there are quotas reserved for Filipinos. It might be hard to believe, pero meron talagang mga they're so-called visa pathways reserved for us because we have proven ourselves. But it's not just in the dairy industry.
Yep. So book na ang mga Pinoy. Like they know that they can rely on Filipinos. So which brings me to another point, Noel, because now that we have that reputation, now that we have that trust, now that we know that Kiwis really prefer Filipinos because they can depend on them, I really feel bad when I hear certain sad stories or negative stories, because you said we are anchoring our name from the people that have been there before us. So what can you say if there are still some pasaway Filipinos who have not yet gotten rid of their previous attitudes and mentalities and are not, psychologically ready to change their mindset to work in a foreign land? What can you say about that?
Ang nangyayari diyan is yung mga typical Filipino bad habits natin, yung mga kung pwedeng makalusot, ilulusot, diba? Yung mga finding back doors, and typical as you may know, you know very well because you have also stayed here longer than I have. Alam mo naman, these things just don't work, especially in the Commonwealth countries like Australia, Canada. Hindi talaga umuubra yan. Hindi talaga ubra yan sa mga bansang tulad ng New Zealand. Ang nangyayari yan, it's the system. It's the system that weeds out those anomalies na may mga taong akala nila you might be able to escape with one or two cases na nakalusot ka, but you can't do it all the time. I'm sad to say that in the dairy industry, there was a recruiter, sad to say, kabayan, na marami siyang naipasok dito sa New Zealand as worker. Kaya lang, she was using dodgy documentation. Eventually, she was found out. I don't know if you've heard of that case, but so many people were affected because even though they did nothing wrong, even though they had the qualifications, the documentation was faulty.
That's right.
And buti na lang. I think this will be a partial answer to your question. In cases like these, nagbibigay ng forgiveness, for lack of a better term. The New Zealand government forgives these cases when parang the Filipino workers were unwitting in their being part of this.
That's right. Yeah.
So I want to answer your question. What do we do when we have kabayan who cannot?
That's right. What do we do? That's the
let
question.
go. What do we do? Ang sagot yan, iisa lang. The system. It's the system of me. It's not perfect. You know very well it's not a perfect system. There are it's faulty. Pero as a rule, it will weed out those who are fraud and who want to use shortcuts and wala. Pag may sumabit, wala na nila yun.
That's right.
Pero as a rule, I can tell you the Filipinos, yun ang phenomena ng Filipino eh. Sa labas ng Pilipinas, Filipinos follow the law. Alam mo ba yun? Diba?
So, that's also
tayo,
part of
tayo sa Pilipinas eh.
I know, Noel, because that's part of when you leave your country for various reasons, personal reasons, professional reasons, there's that Filipino mentality as well that I have to survive in this new environment. So I have to be
Correct.
more matino and I have to change.
Correct.
I have to survive. So that means part of me will have to kind of shift my my level of thinking.
Paradigm
For
shift.
example,
Yes.
for example, even if you are a nurse, you don't start as a nurse straight away. Sometimes you do
Correct.
those odd jobs, or sometimes you are in a
Tama.
lower level, like a PCA, the personal care assistant, and then you
Yes,
get local
yes.
qualifications before you become a real nurse in New Zealand.
Bridging or a
Um,
bridging course.
That's right. So, in a way, can you say that this kind of trend has been consistent over the years, or has it changed now?
Absolutely. I can tell you na there are Filipinos, ayun na naman tayo, no? Ayoko naman sabihin na nagbubuhat tayo ng bangko, no? Pero we are resilient, you know? We make do. We are a make do people. We often enter situations that aren't ideal. Like, for example, we like to think of ourselves as above average English speakers. Totoo naman yon. But you know very well, the Kiwi English is a different banana altogether. It's a different. So, papasok ka rito, nurse ka, no? Kunwari, board passer ka. You speak English reasonably well. Papasok mo, yung pala maintindihan yung English ng Kiwi. So, but you make do, di ba? You make do. They might be able to understand you, pero you don't understand everything they say. But yes, this is a common migrant experience of Filipinos everywhere, di ba?
Yeah.
Yan, that's
So,
what I'm
are you
trying to
saying
say.
that the workforce base or the Filipinos that have consistently entered the country and have settled them have grown over the years? So, has it stabilized now? Because New Zealand probably has had a quota na, or they already have the number of people that they need to serve the different industries where those skills are required. What can you say about that situation at the moment?
Ganito masasabi ko, Mimi, no? There are, I think, around 20, it's a ballpark figure, around 20,000 Filipino work visa holders in various industries dito sa New Zealand. The phenomena of the New Zealand labor market is that it will always have unemployment and underemployment, diba? That's part and parcel of the reality of New Zealand. Ang problema, the New Zealand will always need migrant labor because it is willing to work for rates below that New Zealanders will accept. So,
yes.
In other words, businessmen will always find the lowest level. And it doesn't have to be any particular industry. It's in many industries. And it affects not just, and it favors not just Filipino migrant workers. Lahat yan. Lahat nanggagaling sa South Asia, nanggagaling sa Third World, anywhere. So in answer to your question, Filipinos will always be wanted here as scaffolders, as builders, as like we said nga kanina, daily workers. In the South Island, Filipinos are running dairy farms.
The dairy industry is dominated by Filipino workers. Yeah.
You will find story after story of dairy owners saying, "My dairy farm will not operate. It will not function without these workers."
Yeah.
Ang problema, immigration New Zealand, politically and economically, they have to set what you call remuneration bands para ma-justify nila yung kanilang to maintain, their migrant numbers. Well, if you're earning below this number, how can you justify giving you a work visa? You're earning below the median wage, tapos ibigyan ka ng work visa. You're earning below, di ba? Hindi naman below minimum, pero below the
But
median.
still not the
Tapos
average pay. Yeah.
Correct.
But
Tapos sasabihin ng mga
Filipinos
employers,
will take it because that's still even higher than what they would have earned back home.
Correct.
So like you said, they will just take whatever they can take.
Yes, it's really supply and demand, di ba?
Yeah.
Kung yun ang ino-offer na wage, tatanggapin ko yan because I have to work, di ba? And of course, we have to admit, Mimi, at the end of the day, there is still that carrot hanging, di ba? At the end of the spring saying, malay mo, maging permanent resident.
That's right. There's always a possibility.
You wait long, if you wait hard enough, if you're diligent in your work, there's always that, which is unfortunately not that, it's becoming harder and harder.
Okay.
It's not as easy.
Yeah. So you mentioned that as one of the greatest challenges, the pay, but still a little bit better. What other challenges can you pick up or identify that you can share that the Filipinos in New Zealand are currently, facing at this current political, socio-economic climate, aside from the wages aspect?
If you remember the time you were still in New Zealand, maybe before you re-migrated for Australia, re-migrated. It's that every time the election period comes around, or every time the election season comes around, they always have to say certain things like, okay, we will keep migrant numbers down. Okay, we will give more jobs to New Zealand. It's the same. It just repeats. It's a cycle that repeats itself. Kaya lang, every election season, it becomes harder to justify same migrant numbers. Kasi nga, bumababa yung mga job numbers, umaakit ang mga unemployment numbers. And of course, as you very well know, the coronavirus has not helped any. We're looking at an all-time high now of probably 10 to 12% unemployment, which is, wow, if you think about it, 4 million, workforce of 2 million, you just do the numbers. Nakakatakot.
It's really nakakatakot because you're such a small country. But imagine magnify that 5 times here. The unemployment numbers, because we're a bigger country, we're a continent in itself.
Correct.
And
Correct.
New Zealand's population is just the population of Melbourne, 5 million.
Correct.
So imagine Melbourne having this problem at the moment.
But
I feel you, my brother.
Correct. I absolutely agree with. Kaya ang nakakatawa diyan, yung paradox. Sorry to use a term like paradox. Napaka very odd term. And the paradox is, in Australia, as well as in New Zealand, business will always absorb migrant workers.
That's right.
Hindi mawawala yan. Kasi nga, because it's a supply and demand issue. The minimum wage is $18. The white guy says, I'm not gonna take $18. I can work in the mall for $20. Okay?
Yeah.
Here comes Pinoy. Here comes Juan de la Cruz. Tatanggapin ko po yan. $18. Walang problema po sa akin.
That's right.
What will businessmen do? That is the paradox. There will always be a place for Filipino migrants.
That's right. Okay.
And we have natural advantages, like I said earlier. Dahil marunong nga tayo mag-English. Marunong tayo makisama. Hindi tayo mayabang. Well, as far as
we're still the preferred candidate.
Yes, we are the preferred candidates.
Yeah.
Yun ang mga challenges lang natin, yung paminsan-minsan they have to adjust so-called numbers every time the election. Pero cyclical lang yun. In answer to your question.
Yeah. So Noel, just linking that into your blogging and your concern for the Filipinos, what makes you really interested in this topic about immigration, migration, Filipinos settling in New Zealand? And I read your blogs, and I really feel that the words and the content and everything is so relatable. So can you give our listeners an idea of why this is such an important topic for you and why you're passionate about that?
Okay. Ganito kasi yun. It took me a really long time to get, to gain a foothold. Foothold lang ako sa pagiging resident dito sa New Zealand. And I really feel it every time I see someone na who tries to dream the migrant dream. Ngayon, tuwing may nakikita akong tao na nasisiraan ng loob, I feel it's part of my duty to share with him my experience. Dahil alam mo, as you know very well, no, every Filipino's experience papuntang permanent residence, unique yan eh. Unique yan dahil some may have gone here ahead. You know, I was part of the wave of, I lived with a group of 60 Filipino linemen. If you remember the Downer group,
yeah.
Dumating sila rito, ano lang sila, placement agency lang sila. They came from all over the world. Pasok sila rito. So, na-realize ko yung mga kwento na led the different backstories. So, that led me to my blog. Sabi ko, I wish I could tell people about how migrant life here, from ground zero. Here in and like I told you nga, there are two very distinct parts of the Pinoy community here in Wellington. Kasi there are these people who are here, okay na sila, wala na kaming problema. And then there are these people who are very transitory. If I'm here next year, same time next year, I'll consider myself to be a very lucky person. And that's how my blog was born. Just plugging it, ylbnoel.wordpress.com.
And in the near future, that might be transformed into a podcast the next time. You never know.
Yes, with inspiration and guidance from Miss Mimi Laurilla, Guerrilla Podcast Network.
Yes, we will do our training sessions and everything else offline, Noel. So,
thank you.
And you know, the podcast episodes don't run forever. So I think I will have to end our session now, our show now. But for my last question, Noel, what do you advise other people who may be listening to us? It could be in the Philippines, it could be somewhere else, not in the Philippines, who are still dreaming of a potential life in New Zealand, because they don't want to visit New Zealand just for the heck of visiting it. They really want to migrate there. What advice can you give them?
Ako, no, as always, I'll be basing my impromptu advice on my own experience. And my own experience is, kung gusto mong sumubok, no, pagiging migrante sa isang bansang tulad ng New Zealand, it's this: don't stop learning. Don't stop learning. Don't be afraid to learn new things, because ako, no, probably like you, white collar ako Philippines. Pero nandito, sinubukan ko maging factory worker. Sinubukan ko maging miller. I worked in a flour mill. And that's how I got lucky. Second thing, don't be afraid to learn, and don't be afraid to upskill. Don't be afraid, kunwari, you're asked to volunteer to learn other things, lateral development. Tanggapin mo. Huwag kang matakot na mag-admin, huwag kang matakot. Kung nasa production ka, huwag kang matakot ng packing. Dito, there's a health and safety industry. People become health and safety auditors. Dito kasi alam niyo naman ang health and safety culture tulad ng Australia. So yun, just to summarize, don't be afraid to learn new things, and don't be afraid to upskill.
So in other words, we have to be versatile, and we should not be stuck with what we know, because you know, like I said, it's a survival instinct also. You'll do anything and everything.
Pinoy, maparaan yan at 20s, at 30s, at 40s, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Diba? 50s to new 40. 40s
I believe that. I believe that, because that's our age bracket now. So we have to be, in line with whatever it is that's current in society. So if 40 is the new 50, I'll go with that. I'm okay with that.
Okay, very well
Noel,
said. Alam mo.
Thank you very much for coming today. So guys, if you have any stories or topics that you wish to feature in the show, please reach out to me via email at mimi@dinosocial.com. Samu't Sari is a member of the Guerrilla Podcast. You can reach out to me by my Facebook page, my Twitter account, and of course through YouTube channel. Noel, it's been a pleasure. Hopefully there will be a part 2. Hopefully there will be part 2 or part 3 if our our schedules allow us to come together again.
Always here.
Yes, and I'm looking forward to reading more of your blogs and hopefully
Thank
listening
you.
to your podcast. So, Noel, bye for now.
Likewise.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
And
you. Thank you to all your listeners.
thank you. And this is Mimi saying goodbye. See you next time for the next edition of Samu't Sari. Bye, everyone.
If you find value in this episode, make sure you like and subscribe to be notified of new releases. If you have any questions or suggestions, please reach out to Guerrilla Podcast or send us an email at mimi@dinosocial.com. Spread the word and don't forget to tune in next time.